So generally, Wolves do pretty well against Villa. If anyone was to like shit house a result at Villa Park this weekend, could Wolves do it?
Look, in previous seasons when we had the likes of Matthias Cunha and Ryan Nori, I'd be like, yeah, definitely, because it's kind of like in the history books, Wolves can go to Villa Park, or I mean, more prominently at Molineux, we're actually better. The last couple of times at Villa Park, you actually beat us, to be fair, quite comfortably. But this season, like, I know a lot of Villa fans are kind of worried, saying like, it'd only be Villa to kind of do this, drop teams, drop points to the worst team in the league, being Wolves. But for me, I just don't see the quality in the squad. I don't see a player who's really going to, pick up a ball, score a goal out of nothing. Because let's be completely real, you guys are going to have all the possession. You guys are going to be dominating the game. So we're going to be on the back foot. We don't really have the pace to counter attack. So I just don't see where the goals are coming from. So if we had some players that had, kind of some individual quality that could do the job, I'd say yeah, definitely. But I just don't trust this team at all.
Welcome back to the latest episode of B6 and Beyond. You are here with me and Cory, and as you've just heard George speaking here, we've got George on joining us, who is Wolves fan. You've probably seen him on TikTok. Go and follow him if you're not already. We're Villa fans, but he's a Wolves fan, and he's genuinely very good on TikTok, and his content is brilliant. So before we do get into it, I just want to remind everyone we do have an ongoing giveaway for match tickets or a shirt of your choice. All that you need to do is hit that subscribe button. We give away that every 500 subscribers, and we are getting close to the next giveaway, so don't miss out on that. Right, lads, let's get into it because this is what we're here for. So, obviously, it's been a difficult season so far. I think it's been well documented that Wolves have been pretty poor. Just from the outside looking in and from my general perception of it, it just feels like that you've kind of been shit on by your owners a little bit, and it reminds me, and it has lots of parallels to the season when we got relegated, where Randy Lerner completely pulled the money out of Villa, didn't reinvest in the playing squad enough, and the standards of the squad just dropped, and just seeing it from the outside looking in again, Wolves have gone from a team that were like in the Europa League quarter final, I think it was against Sevilla, and you had a ridiculously good side, with the likes of Diogo Jota, Raul Jimenez, Adama Traore, Ruben Neves, top players to the side that you've got now. No disrespect, it's similar to like Villa when we had Ashley Young, the Gareth Barry side, Ashley Young, James Milner, Carew, etc., and then we ended up like with the likes of Ashley Westwood and all that, those absolute dossers that took us down into the Championship. Would that be a fair comparison?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's fairly similar. I think the one main difference would be is I feel like you guys probably did spend money badly, whereas we just haven't really. We have spent badly, but we also really haven't put the investment in, really. Signings recently have been really, really poor. And you look at the players that left Wolves last summer, players like Pablo Sarabia, Ryan Nori, Matthias Cunha, all those type of players, Nelson Semedo. They're all signed for Wolves when we were in a very good position. Semedo and Nori came in, we still had Nuno, so that's kind of, probably our peak of our powers. We just finished seventh for the second time. You can bring in players like that. Matthias Cunha and Pablo Sarabia, well, they were brought in when we had Julian Lopetegui, like a manager who, massive pedigree, arguably bigger than Nuno. The problem is now, we can't attract those types of players, so if you're going to sell those types of players, you've got to think smart and recruit smartly. But there's two factors for me, really. People look at Wolves and see the regression, 2 seventh place finishes, then 10th, then 13th, then 10th, so slightly better, then you're pushing down into 14th. And players are just thinking, like, why would I come to this team when they're just getting worse and worse and worse? Another thing is, and this is kind of unlucky, foreign players don't want to live in Wolverhampton, which is, it sounds a bit daft, but that is the case, and we're not a high-paying Premier League club either, so in terms of where the club is at, it's not an attractive place for players to go. And obviously, when you got brilliant players like Matthias Cunha, like Ryan Nori, you're eventually going to lose them if you're not progressing. So this is the problem we've got. And for me, it's on the owners because we're in a great position. I'll give them credit where it's due. They got us in that position. But due to hundreds of silly mistakes, using PSR and FFP as an excuse. Like, for example, you guys have found loopholes around FFP. We just say, right, I know you've been shafted by FFP, but you haven't just given up and been like, right, we're just going to not spend any money because the league says we can't. With us, FFP, the owners think, right, that's the excuse. That's the why we say we're not going to spend. They spent a lot more money on esports. And yeah, they don't really know what they're doing. Nuno got them in the position they are. They said Nuno was lucky. No, they were lucky for appointing Nuno and getting him in the position. So yeah, they don't really know what they're doing, and they don't care about the fans. We pay £900 a season ticket, and we haven't even seen a home win yet this season. So it's, unless they do a benchmarking towards you guys, like, you know, similar pricing towards Villa, and obviously the amount of money you've invested, the amount of money we've invested, so it shows. So yeah, they're a disgrace, really.
Yeah, it's utterly disgraceful. I'll tell you, you mentioned the players that have left there, and you do mention some ridiculously talented player. And I think one player that massively gets overlooked who has left, because anytime anyone speaks about the players that have left Wolverhampton Wanderers this summer, and, you know, you always get the likes of, you know, your Cunha and Aït-Nouri mentioned, but I think the one that really hits home for me which is losing Nelson Semedo on a free transfer, because ultimately he was your captain, and he was a fantastic right back as well. Nelson Semedo, that was a big loss in my opinion. I think if you'd have kept hold of him and got him to convince him to renew his contract, I think it could have give you something different. Just his leadership skills alone would have been massive for the dressing room, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, with Semedo, we did offer him a deal. Gary O'Neill stated, you know, I want to give him a contract like a year ago. But Wolves' owners, being Wolves' owners, they acted late. They thought, oh no, we'll just leave it to the last minute, he'll renew. He pretty much already made his mind up. Obviously, we did give him a generous contract, so he could give him that. But I think it was at the point where it was like he'd already made up his mind. You could throw whatever money at him. He saw where the club was going. He saw all the big players were leaving. I mean, he did leave it late, I suppose. Maybe he did reconsider. Massive loss, you know, captain. He'd been the right back for so many years. And, you know, he did have a slow start to his Wolves career. And some Wolves fans will say, you know, he was pricey with all the add-ons and everything like that. I think it was about 37 million in the end. But when you look at it, probably his last 3 seasons in a Wolves shirt, he was very, very effective, quick, strong, as you mentioned, the leadership. The problem is now we don't have a leader. You know, you've seen it against Crystal Palace the other day. We've got a new manager bounce. There should be spirit, there should be belief. They score, the heads just drop. I mean, Totti Gomez is, you know, he's a decent Premier League centre back. He has been. He needs players around him. He needs players spurring him on. He shouldn't be the captain. No way.
I think one result. Go on, sorry, Cory.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, I think the thing that confuses me a lot as well is, obviously I've not watched a lot of Wolves. I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched every minute of every game. But like, I look at players like Tommy Doyle, for example, a young player who seemed to be sort of reaching the heights everyone was going on about him, and then he's just been sent on loan. I understand, obviously, you've got João Gomez and you've got Andre in the middle, who are 2 quality players. But do you think sometimes it's like you look at players like that who are young, and you think that's the sort of player you could do with having just someone who's going to go out there with a bit of freedom?
Well, yeah, I mean, what happened with Tommy Doyle was Vitor Pereira basically said, I don't rate him. And obviously, our big thing this summer was like, right, Vitor Pereira's come in and he's done a great job. But the owners basically said, right, we're just going to give him the keys to the city, basically. They allowed him to bring his sporting director. He brought in more staff. So obviously, when we sacked him, it wasn't just him who was being sacked. It was all the coaching staff. It was the sporting director. And what happens is then, Tommy Doyle, a brilliant player who would be very useful now, because we can't create any chances. He's a progressive player. He's gone, and we can't get him back because there's no clause to recall him. If Blues don't go up, which I know you boys will be backing them not to, but there's every chance they could, we can't recall him. But if they stay down, then we can recall him. So he might be useful next season. Who knows? Knowing our luck, the Blues probably go up and we go down. But yeah, it's a strange one. Neither Gary O'Neill or Pereira really rated him, but I probably, as an ownership, you got to look and think, you know, they've only got 4 midfielders as it is. None of them can really pass a ball. Why would you not keep him? Even if Pereira's saying no. And you look at Pereira's track record, leaving clubs, you know, max 18 months. It's ridiculous.
I'll tell you one game that kind of epitomised your season for me, and it kind of like, you know, you thought this could be the turning point, and I thought you were absolutely brilliant that game. I watched it. Was the away game at Spurs, and I remember rightly, you didn't go that game because you was at the boxing or something. Remember right? Was that correct?
Yeah, so
yeah, that's it. Oasis.
I couldn't even. I couldn't go. I also couldn't watch it. That sums it up for me.
They were very good, and they deserved 3 points. I thought you battered Spurs, and you kept. Don't get me wrong, Spurs have been pretty poor at home this season, but you did a job on them. And to concede the way the last minute, it was a lovely goal from João Palhinha, But it's just the manner of it conceding last minute. If you'd have just got through and got the 3 points, it could have been the turning point for your season. It just hasn't happened yet, has it?
Yeah, I mean it was weird because that Spurs game. After that, it did sort of look like we were starting to get a bit better because didn't wish we should have beat Spurs. We drew with Spurs after a good performance. Obviously, I didn't watch loads of it, but from what I've seen, we look defensively solid, and even Arias had a good game. He's been like shocking this season. And then we beat Everton in the cup midweek, like a nice 2-0 win. I was thinking, we could be progressing here. Brighton, we go 1-0 up, get a 1-1 there. That's a decent point. And then your next 2 games are Sunderland and Burnley, and you're thinking like, yes, we've not been good. We've just lost the Leeds 3-1. We're unbeaten in 3 all competitions. We're looking a bit better. And then we have the international break. That Sunderland game comes around. Absolutely dreadful. I mean, obviously it's a tough place to go. Sunderland have been good, but they weren't that good. They really weren't. And they were just very solid. And we had a lot of chances. They just played a very basic game. We had a lot of chances, didn't put them away. Certain players just absolutely terrible. Obviously, lose that Sunderland game, you're thinking, we've got Burnley next week, it's a must win. And then obviously that to lose in the manner we did against Burnley just summed it up really. We should have sat Vitor there and then given him an extra week was a horrible decision. But
yeah, I think it's those two results you've just mentioned there, the Burnley and Leeds game. They're the 2 results that give me confidence going into this weekend, and that's not to you've only got 2 points this season. I mean, just them 2 results in particular, because I would probably say Burnley are the worst side I've seen this season by a country mile. At Villa Park, they were terrible.
We were the better team in that Burnley game. I think Burnley probably got a bit more fight, a bit more belief, a bit more leadership. I think when you come player to player, I do think we have a slightly stronger squad, which is obviously quite a bold thing to say when you're only on 2 points. But after watching that game, we were the better side. At the end of the day, they went 2-0 up. We got it back to 2-2. And we hit the bar in the 70th minute, so it could have been a completely different game. We had plenty of chances. We even when they made it 3-2, Strand Larson did a really good flick on, and Santi Bueno probably should have scored right at the end, so it could have easily been 3-3 as well. But that game was an absolute shambles, but we were unlucky. And this is the thing, even though we've been dreadful, apart from the last 3 games, up until that point, and the City game, they'd all been quite close games, only losing by 1 or 2 goals. And we're in most games, whereas towards the end of Vitor's era, and then the Palace game, Rob Edwards only had 1 or 2 days of the squad before the season begins. So I'm not trying to say we've been decent, but I think there has been some guys who've been quite unlucky. So that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of confidence. But I do think we're more or less down, to be honest.
Just to touch on that, George. Obviously, you've just said about a bit of confidence there. That was going to be sort of my question. Is when you look at those games, you're thinking that you're pretty much thinking we're basically down out because you're losing those games to teams like Leeds, teams like Burnley, teams like Sunderland who've just got. Don't know, obviously Sunderland have surprised a lot of people, but then obviously on the flip side, like you say, they're close games. So does that give you a bit of confidence to maybe think if you can get 1 win, all of a sudden you might be able to go on a run, or do you just think it could be a case of you might get a win here and there, and you're just gonna have to hope that when you do get your wins, other teams are dropping points?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see. I think we possibly could finish higher than Burnley, Leeds. I think the fact that Sunderland have been so good, that's really halted us because if the 3 promoted teams were as bad as last season, you'd give you half a chance. But obviously Sunderland have been really good, so I just don't think there's any coming back. You look at the other teams down there, Fulham, why better than us? West Ham, they've been poor, but they've got our best ever manager. They've got players like Jarrod Bowen who can just get them out of the mess. We don't have that. So I just can't see. Maybe we aim to finish 18th, 19th, so it's not a complete embarrassment. But yeah, I just can't see it happening, to be honest. I think it's too late. You could spend a load of money in January, but what's the point? No good players are going to want to come to us. So yeah, it's a shame because, I love football. I want to see my team playing well, but the season's not like a non-entity, really.
I think it's a fair assessment, but what I would say is, looking at it from, again, a neutral point of view, you're only 9 points off West Ham, and you're only 10 points off Nottingham Forest, which sounds a lot, but in the Premier League, you win if you literally get on a couple wins behind you, you can get a bit of the win behind yourselves. And I got to be honest, I think West Ham. I know you said about Nuno, but it hasn't worked for him yet. They've looked horrendous. West Ham have. I think Forest will be fine. I think Forest they'll go on a bit of a run now of games, but I just think with Europe as well, that could be something that plays into them suffering this season. They won't go down. But the one team, like I would say West Ham potentially could still get dragged into that dogfight, and maybe Fulham, because Marco Silva, he's not got Fulham ticking this season, has he? I just think if you just get a result, maybe you could start to get a bit of momentum. But you look at your fixtures that are coming up, and I'm just like, where is it coming? Like, you got Villa this weekend, then it's Forest at home, beat Forest, and then we might be talking. But then it's like United, Arsenal, Brentford, who ain't been bad this season, Liverpool, who are horrendous, so you'll probably beat them. Man United, and then then the West Ham game comes.
When you're the worst team in the league, you're probably looking at that from like sort of a Villa fan's perspective. Those teams, like you say, Liverpool horrendous, probably beat them, but like it's still because they've got players who've got quality. We don't, and like this is the problem. When you're the worst team in the league, every game's massive, and you lose those games. Let's say we beat Burnley, that would have put us on 5 points. You're in touching distance then. Like it's almost like the damage has already been done. And I'm quite a positive fan as well, but the performance and obviously Cory, you said you haven't watched a whole lot of Wolves. Ben, I know you said you've watched the Spurs game. Probably the guys who've been on Sky have been slightly better, but like some of the performances are just. Yeah, I mean, like players like last season were really performing well. Agbadou completely gone off the boil. Totti completely gone off the boil. Doherty, they were like the centre backs last season, the 3 centre backs. He's not been playing. We've got Rodrigo Gomez is injured, which is a real shame. He's a good young player. Strand Larsen just looks like he didn't really want to be there, to be honest.
Could I ask one question about one player? What have you thought of Fer Lopez so far this season? Because I had high hopes for him joining you this year.
I think he's been decent. I never like to put any blame on the young players because ultimately it's not their fault. And to be honest, it's not the players' fault because it's a recruitment issue. But with Lopez, he's done some good things. He's created quite a lot, but then for every goal he's created, he's probably also given a chance away. He does lose the ball a lot. What was interesting was when the under-21s coach had us for a game, he actually took him out of the squad and put Mane and Enzo Gonzalez in ahead of him. So, he's looked okay when he's played. Pereira didn't really play him. He was back on the bench under Rob Edwards. We signed 17 million on a player who's not really even first team ready. I mean, that 17 million could have gone anywhere else. I think it's a good prospect. I think a lot of the fans rate him, but I think it's almost like a bit out of desperation. Some players not really not playing well, and you kind of just like, get him on, because purely based on the fact they're not playing. So I think he's been okay, but he's not the answer. Definitely not.
I think that's the thing with football as well, isn't it? When things aren't going your way, they're not going your way. I was working in Norwich this week, and I went to the Norwich game, and they haven't won a game at home all season. They were 1-0 up and conceded pretty much last kick of the game against Oxford. And I was watching that, and that would probably be a similar vibe to Wolves at the moment, where it just seems that every chance that looks like there's a bit of a high, you just can't get your hopes up because you just know something's going to go wrong. And I think there's nothing worse than that feeling.
So, if you had to pick any player, George, who should Villa keep an eye on this weekend? Who could potentially be the danger man for Wolves?
I mean, no one going forward has really done much. That's the problem. I mean, Hugo Bueno would be the one I'd probably go for, but he didn't even start against Palace because obviously Rob Edwards has been playing Wolf. I would say Hugo Bueno. I think he's got a bit of Premier League experience. He's pretty consistent. Considering he's a young lad, he's done quite a lot of the leadership roles this season. Done quite a few of the interviews and stuff. I'm not saying he's going to blow you away, but definitely create a chance or two. The way Rob Edwards seems to be playing is 2 strikers up front. So, if that gets the best out of Strand Larsen, obviously there's a chance he could score some goals. But the way he's been this season, it's just like he just looks so poor compared to last year. And I know obviously you guys have got problems with Ollie Watkins and stuff like that. He's like with a striker not playing on form, but he's just, I don't know. I can't tell if he's unfit or whether he doesn't want to be here or whether he's just not very good without good players around him. I don't know, but he's done nothing. But I would say if he gets a chance in front of goal, he probably will take it. So I'd probably say if it's Larsen or Bueno, but I don't think you've got too much to worry about.
And so from the outside looking in, what's been your perception of Villa so far this season?
So I actually made a TikTok when you guys were struggling at the start of the season. I'm not saying you guys were, but quite a few Villa fans were doubting Unai Emery and saying, oh, you know, he might not be able to bring it back. And I found that ridiculous and a bit disrespectful, to be honest, because I thought, you know, a guy who's come in realistically when you guys were pretty much 17th, like, you know, looking like you could go down, and he's done, you know, he's earned credit in the bank. It's almost like it would have to go worse than what it started with for him to even consider getting sacked. And I always knew he'd turn it around. I looked at his, obviously, you know, you've been shafted by PSR. You know, growing up, I was never really a massive fan of Villa, like in the Championship, mind the gap and all this stuff. But I've actually began to like Villa quite a bit recently, just because of, like, you know, I think you've done really well considering the circumstances. And, you know, every season you have been shafted. I always used to think you spent a lot of money, but if you actually go for the transfer windows, you know, you've had to sell players like John Duran, Moussa Diaby, and you've never really spent like loads. I mean, you're living off the Grealish money for a bit, but to be fair, you sold other players as well. I think you're quite a well-run club. You look at teams like Man United spending loads of money when they're finishing 15th last season, and obviously you're unlucky to get in the Champions League last year. So I do feel for you, but it's, you know, fair play to Unai Emery. He's managed to get, you know, you look at your squad depth now. Pretty much, there's no one really, apart from maybe Evan Guassan, who I know has been very disappointing. I think, you know, you look at your bench, it's like the fact Harvey Elliott isn't even getting in the squad, and you don't even need to rely on him. I think fourth in the league, probably going to win the Europa League phase. Yeah, I think obviously apart from a slow start, I know you weren't scoring much, but then again the window was very up and down, wasn't it? You know, Martinez could have left, Watkins could have left, McGinn could have left at times. So yeah, I think you've bounced back better than you could have done. I don't think you could expect really any higher at this point.
I think it's funny actually you mentioned that. Me and Ben have had this conversation sort of offline, and we said about from Villa's perspective, we've not really hit second gear either. We've sort of all season we've sort of coasted. The only games where we've really stepped up is Man City and Bournemouth. The rest of the games we've played pretty poor and still getting results. And I think that's something that, like you say, because of Unai Emery, we're getting into that phase where we can do that as a team now, which is nice for us.
So final one from me, George. I want to hear your score prediction for the game.
Well, no, I'm not very confident, but I don't predict Wolves to lose because I just don't do that. I don't think you can. So I will say we get a draw. I don't know how it's going to happen. I've got no evidence to suggest why it will happen, but I'm doing it. So I'm going to say 1-1, 2-2, 0-0, whatever. Anything would be good. But you know what? Like, Rob Edwards had a week with the team. Let's see what he can do. Obviously, Derby Day, so that could change the tide a bit. And you guys, like, I think at Villa Park recently, that myth's kind of gone because at the end of the day, like, you have beat us, 2-0 both times last time, Villa Park. But Wolves do usually have the upper hand. And as I said, like, there's not much quality in the squad, so I can't see how it's going to happen. But as I said, I'm not predicting us to lose, because I never do. So there you go. Usually I predict us to win, so, you know, I trust. I said, if I'm wrong, fair play. But I probably will do. I don't do that. I don't predict us to lose.
Right, I'd like to wish you good luck for the weekend, but I'm not going to do that because I hope we smash you. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the game. Right, on that note, we'll leave it there. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and make sure to go and follow George over on TikTok. I'd highly recommend it. His stuff is quite funny. Final one from me and Cory. George isn't going to join us in on this one. Up the Villa.
Up the Villa.
Up the Wolves, come on!